ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. O Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the establisher of the eternal religion, and the best of all incarnations, we salute thee. In the last reading, we were reading at we ended with page 180, para 12. Today we shall continue from the same para 13, page 180. In this book, Sri Ramakrishna, the great master. We start reading this. Hriday used to say that while singing, the master let fall copious tears. He became so much absorbed in worship that he could not know at all if anyone came or spoke near him. The master said that at the time of performing Anganyasa, Karanyasa, etc., he actually saw the letters of the mantras in bright colors set in his body. He actually saw the coiled power, that is Kundalini power, going up in the form of a snake through the Sushumna to the Sahasrara. He felt that the parts of his body left behind by that power at once became still and insensitive and dead to all appearance. Again, when according to the prescribed method of worship, he uttered the mantra Rang, Rang indicates fire, sprinkled water all around himself, and imagined a wall of fire existing around the place of worship. He actually saw an impassable wall of fire with hundreds of tongues spread out, protecting the place of worship from all obstacles. Hriday said that other Brahmins, seeing his mind quite absorbed and body shining all over with a resplendent luster, said to one another, "It is as if Vishnu himself has assumed a human body and has sat down to worship." Ram Kumar, the devotee of the goddess Kali, became to a great extent free from anxiety about the maintenance of his relatives after he came to Dakshineshwar. But he felt from time to time perturbed over another matter, for he noticed in his young brother a fondness for solitude and a queer mood of indifference to worldly affairs. He found in him a complete lack of interest in Gadadhar, in everything. Ramkumar at first thought that the boy was perhaps anxious to return to his mother at Kamarpukur, but and was always thinking of her. He saw the boy, that is Gadadhar, sitting quiet under the Panchavati or taking strolls on the bank of Ganges away from the temple at all times, morning and evening. Or he saw him spending long hours in this jungle that existed all around the Panchavati in those days, and then coming out of it. Time passed, but the boy expressed no desire to return home. Ramkumar sometimes asked about it and knew that he felt no such a desire to go to his hometown, Kamarpukur. He thereupon gave up the idea of sending him home. He thought, "I am advanced in age and am daily becoming infirm. Who knows when my lease of life will come to an end? Under the circumstances, time should not, he thought, be wasted anymore before he passed away." That means Ramkar about himself is telling. Before he passed away, it was his absolute duty to bring up the boy Gadadhar so that he might be able to stand on his own legs, earn a decent living, and manage his worldly affairs. Therefore, Ram Kumar was much pleased when Mathur consulted him about appointing the boy to do the duties of the temple. He became free from anxiety to a great extent when, after a lapse of time, at the request of Mathur, the boy accepted the first, at first the duty of dressing up the image, and afterwards that of officiating as priest, and performed those duties with ability. He now began teaching him the complete reading of the Chandi and the mode of worship of the mother. He thought that this would make his brother an adept in conducting worship, and there would be no difficulty in the worship and service of the Divine Mother if he could not on any occasion perform them. The master soon learnt them, and knowing that it is not proper to worship the goddess without being initiated in her mantra, he resolved to be initiated in the mantra of Kali. A proficient sadhaka of Shakti named Kenaram Bhattacharya used then to live at Baitakana Bazar in Calcutta. He used to frequent the temple of Rani Rasmani at Dakshineshwar, and it seems he was acquainted with Mathur and all other members of the Rani's family. We were told by Hriday that those who knew him paid him great respect as a devout sadhaka. He had been acquainted with the master's brother Ram Kumar for some time past. The master resolved to be initiated by him. We are told that as soon as he was initiated, the master entered into ecstatic state. Kenaram became charmed to see his uncommon devotion and blessed him heartily so that he might realize his chosen ideal. Ram Kumar himself generally performed the service of Radha Govinda at that time and employed the master to worship the Mother Kali, either because he became unable to do so at times or because he wanted to let the master get accustomed to the conduct of the worship. Mathur came to know of it in a short time and, with the permission of the Rani, requested Ram Kumar permanently to perform the worship in the Vishnu temple thenceforward. Vishnu temple is Radhakanta temple. So the master was now appointed to the office of the priest and Hriday to dress the image in the Kali temple. The reason why the arrangement of the worship was changed seems to be that Mathur thought that Ram Kumar had become old and infirm, and it was beyond his power to carry on the more difficult duties of the Kali temple. Ram Kumar was glad to see that arrangement made, and standing beside his brother in the Kali temple taught him how to perform properly that worship and service. He thus became free from anxiety. Shortly afterwards, he spoke to Mathur and had Hriday appointed to worship Radha Govinda. He was now preparing to go home, Ram Kumar, on leave for some time. But Ram Kumar was never to go home again. He went on some business to a place called Shyamnagar Mulajar, to north of Calcutta, for a few days and suddenly died there. Ram Kumar lived and worshipped the Divine Mother for 1 year only after the temple of Rani Rasmani was consecrated. So probably he passed away in the middle of AD 1856. The chapter 6, spiritual eagerness and the first vision of the master. The master's behavior at this time. The master was very young when his father died. He was 7 years old. He was therefore brought up from his childhood under the affectionate care of his mother, Chandra Devi, and his eldest brother, Ram Kumar. Ram Kumar was about 31 years older than the master. Therefore, he received a part of the master's devotion which was due to a father. It is certain that the master was very much grieved at the sudden death of his brother, who was an affectionate to him as a father, and the renunciation of the world on the part of Lord Buddha, an incarnation of God, at the sight of illness, old age, and death is well known. Who will say how far his brother's death contributed to the kindling up of the fire of renunciation in the master's pure mind, by producing in him a firm conviction of the transitoriness of the world. Be that as it may, he applied his mind, Sri Ramakrishna applied his mind more closely to the worship of the Mother of the Universe from this time on, and became anxious to know whether man thirsting for her vision became really blessed with it. We are told that at this time, he used to spend his days sitting with the Divine Mother in the temple, and at the end of worship and becoming absorbed in her. He became overwhelmed with and lost himself in the love of the Mother, while he was singing for her the songs composed by devotees of the Mother, like Ram Prasad and Kamala Kanta. He was extremely reluctant to waste a single moment in vain talk now, and when the door of the temple was closed at midday or at night, he left all company, entered the jungle round the Panchavati, and spent his time in the thought and meditation of the Mother of the Universe. These actions of the Master were not agreeable to Hriday, but what could he do? It was not unknown to him that from his childhood the Master accomplished whatever he wanted to accomplish, and nobody could prevent him. It was therefore of no avail to protest to him or hinder him. But Hriday could not help hinting to him his anxiety when he saw that mood growing with alarming rapidity every day. Hriday became very anxious on knowing that instead of sleeping, Sri Ramakrishna left his bed and went somewhere at night, for he would have to stand the hard labor of the divine service in the temple during the day, but instead of sleeping, he left his bed and went out. Besides, the master did not take now as much food as he used to once take. It was probable that under the circumstances his health might break down if he did not sleep at night. So Hriday resolved to inquire about it and set things right as far as it lay in his power. The condition of the Panchavati at that time. The land surrounding the Panchavati is the place where 5 trees are planted, and those small plants become big trees, and that place itself called Panchavati, with the place with 5 trees. These 5 trees are supposed to be sacred trees, brought from sacred places, and that was the place where Sri Ramakrishna was going there every night. This land surrounding the Panchavati was not even then as it is now. It was full of pits, ditches, lowlands, jungles, etc. There grew an amlaki tree among the wild trees and plants. It was a burial ground besides being a jungle. Therefore, people hardly went there even in the daytime. If they went that way at all, they never entered the jungle. So, going there at night was out of the question. No one ventured there for fear of ghosts. We have heard from Hriday that the tree grew on a low piece of land, so anyone sitting under the tree could not be seen from the high land outside the jungle. The master used to sit under that amlaki tree for meditation at night. One night, when the master started for that place, Hriday followed him without his knowledge and saw him enter the jungle. He did not go farther lest master should be annoyed. But in order to frighten him, he threw stones and some gravel so that they fell around Sri Ramakrishna for some time. Seeing that this did not bring the master back, he could not do anything but return to his room. He asked the master during his leisure the next day, "What do you do when you enter the jungle at night?" "There is," replied the master, "an amlaki tree there. I sit under it and practice meditation." The scriptures say that anyone who meditates under the amlaki tree with whatever desire in his mind, he gets it fulfilled. As soon as the master sat for meditation under the tree, after that event, there happened from time to time various kinds of disturbances, like stone throwing, for a few days. Although he knew that it was all Hriday's doing, the master never mentioned anything to him. But Hriday could not feel at ease when he found that he could not dissuade him by that means. One day, Hriday entered the jungle with a silent step shortly after the master had gone to the tree and saw from a distance that he had put off his cloth and the sacred thread also and was sitting at ease in meditation. When he saw this, he thought, "Has Uncle gone mad? It is only mad people that would do so. If he wants to meditate, let him do it by all means. But why does he throw off the only cloth he has on?" Thinking so, he immediately approached him and said, "What is this? How is it that have put off your sacred thread and the cloth and are stark naked?" When thus shouted at a few times, the master gained his normal consciousness and heard Hriday put those questions to him. He said, "What do you know? Thus freed from all ties, bondages, one should practice meditation." Reply of Sri Ramakrishna: "From his birth, man labors under 8 bondages of hatred, fear, shame, aversion, egoism, vanity, pride of noble descent, and obsession with formal good conduct. The sacred thread also is a bondage, for it is a sign of egoism. I am a Brahmin and superior to all. When one calls on Mother, Divine Mother, one should discard these bondages and call on her with a concentrated mind. That is why I have put off these. I shall put them on again when I return at the end of meditation. Hriday was aghast to hear these words which he had never heard before, and, unable to say anything in reply, left that place. A little while previously, he had thought that he would convince his uncle of his mistake in various ways and scold him, but what he actually did was nothing of the kind. It is good to state one fact here, that connection with the event mentioned above, for if that is known, we shall be able to understand many of the events that followed in the Master's life. The Master could not, we saw, rest assured that by discarding the 8 bondages only mentally, he could be freed from them. He renounced them physically also as far as possible. We see him behaving similarly with regard to all other matters in later life. Take, for example, the following facts. In order to destroy vanity, born of noble descent, and thereby acquire true humility, he cleaned very carefully with his hands the place which is absolutely shunned as unclean by others, like a toilet, etc. If the human mind could not regard alike a clod of earth, a stone, and gold, that is, if it could not regard metals like gold and precious stones to be as worthless as clod of earth, it could not, he was told, free himself from the desire of enjoying bodily pleasures. Completely turn towards God and fix itself in yoga. As soon as he heard this, the Master took in his hand a few coins and clods of earth and threw them into the Ganga, repeating over and over again, Rupee, earth, earth, rupee, and threw both of them into Ganges. In order to make firm his knowledge that Shiva, the God, is in all jivas, creatures, he ate and put on his head as prasada a little of the leavings from the leaf plates of the poor people after they had been fed at the Kali temple. Afterwards, he carried those leaves on his head to the bank of Ganga, took a broom and swept and washed the place clean with his own hands. He felt happy to think that a little of the service of God had been performed with the help of that mortal body of his. He thought his body is an instrument, and he used it for cleaning the place where the poor people had been fed and they had taken food. So that was a service to God, he thought. Many similar events may be mentioned. It is seen in all these cases that he did not rest satisfied with mere mental renouncing of the obstacles on the path to the realization of God, but discarded them at first in their gross forms also. Not only give up mentally, physically also he gave up. In other words, he kept his body and senses away from them as far as possible, the physical things, and compelled them forcibly to act contrary to their natural inclinations. Natural inclinations of the senses was go to enjoy the sense world. He kept the senses under control, took it away from the desire of enjoyment. So this was to make what he thought as dangerous or unwanted or against the saintly life, not only you give it up mentally, give it up physically also. That was what he was doing. It is seen that acting thus, his mind had all its past impressions destroyed completely, and it grasped the new contrary ones so firmly that it could not act against them. He got tremendous control over his senses, though his senses could not attract him towards the sense world. He did not admit that new ideas had properly been grasped and contrary ones given up, till at least a little of the former had been converted into practice with the help of the body and the senses. So he always wanted the practice of the ideas. So in the religion also, in other ways also, a person of practical sense, he will never be satisfied with only theory. Suppose we read the books on science only in theory, we never go to a laboratory and we never experiment. We will never become scientists. So there must be theory and practice. So in spiritual world, Sri Ramakrishna introduced this, just as a scientist would do in the physical laboratory. Sri Ramakrishna introduced into the spiritual laboratory of the mind that not only you should think high thoughts, you must put it into action through your body and mind. Wholly averse to giving up past impressions, we think that there is no need of such actions on the part of the master. This is an objection raised. In the course of discussing such actions of his, some have that this method gone to the length of saying his actions such as cleaning the abominable places, throwing into the Ganga the coins and the clods of earth, repeating rupee earth, earth rupee, seem to be whims of his fancy. The mental development that you obtain through those extraordinary means could be obtained more quickly through far easier ones. In reply, we have to say, the author says, it all sounds very well. What you say, that you can acquire it much easier than the method he has adopted. It sounds very nice, but how many people up till now have been able to become completely averse to sights, tastes, and other worldly objects and have devoted their whole minds to God by adopting your so called easier means of mentally giving up sensuous things? Simply mentally giving up, you 100 times you think, I don't want such and such a pleasure, such and such a luxury. You may think 100 times. When that luxury comes before you, you fall a prey. You become a victim. So the author is asking, how many have succeeded by only mentalizing the renunciation without having recourse to external practices? It can never be. One cannot succeed in any great undertaking, let alone the realization of God, when one's mind has one idea and moves in a particular direction, while the body acts contrary to that idea and moves in a different direction. Our senses are all attracted to this sense world, the objects of senses. Mind says, no, we don't want the sense pleasure, we want divine pleasure, spiritual pleasure. Therefore, don't go to the sense object, go to God. We want the mind to go inside in our mind. That means we want to have good control, complete control over senses. How many have been able to achieve this? But eagerly longing for the enjoyments of sight, taste, etc., man does not realize the truth of the statement that you should practice from the very beginning. Whatever you think as not good, immediately to give it physically also. Don't simply think I have thought and I have impressed on my mind, it is bad, I have overcome it. No. Until you practice it physically and you are unable, the senses are unable to take you, drag you to the sense objects, until then you cannot be sure that you have control over your senses. Under the control of past impressions, he does not try to give up with his body and senses any of their objects, even when he realizes that it is good to renounce. but goes on thinking, let the body do as it will, let the mind soar high. Eager to have yoga and bhoga simultaneously, he deceives himself. People who say, no, body is having its own enjoyments, but my mind is at a higher level. It cannot be. It's a body-mind complex. So he is deceiving himself. See, the author says, for like light and darkness, these two things can never coexist. The enjoyment is sense pleasure, and at the same time, the thinking about God and God realization. These two cannot go together, like light and darkness. You may see light, there is no darkness. If there is darkness, there is no light. Both cannot exist together. No one has so far been able to discover an easy method in the spiritual world through which God and the world of lust and gold can be served at the same time. Serving God and mammon, Jesus Christ said, is not possible. You can not serve God and mammon simultaneously. Mammon is money. Therefore, the scriptures repeatedly teach us whatever ought to be given up has to be given up with body, mind, and speech. And whatever ought to be accepted has to be accepted also similarly through body, mind, and speech. Then and then only will the aspirant be fit to realize God. That is why the sages say man can never have the realization of the self with the help of knowledge, unaided by practice, and without putting on emblems which give rise to spiritual attitudes. It is also reasonable to believe that the human mind reaches the subtle state from the gross and causal state from the subtle. There is no other path to the realization of the supreme goal. So that is what the scriptures, which are the recordings of the sages' experiences. So they, through experience, they realize unless you practice physically and mentally also what you philosophize as great principles. So then you cannot say that you have mastered the principles of spiritual life. The manner in which the master performed worship, etc. We have said before that the master applied his mind more closely to the worship of the Divine Mother after the death of his eldest brother. With faith in his heart, he saw now eagerly doing whatever he knew to be favorable to the attainment of Divine Mother's vision. We were told by the Master himself that he regarded as an auxiliary to his daily worship the singing for the goddess of the songs composed by perfected devotees like Ram Prasad. So, by singing the songs of the realized souls, they are singing with their whole heart, weeping before Mother. So, if somebody else sings that one, he imbibes that spirit. So, that is why his mind was filled with zeal when he sang those songs, with his heart full of profound spiritual emotion. He thought devotees like Ram Prasad had the vision of the Mother. So it is certain that the Mother of the universe is realizable. Why can I not then be blessed with her vision? He used to say with an eager heart, Thou showed thyself, O Mother, to Ram Prasad. Why then shouldst thou not reveal thyself to me? I don't want wealth, I don't want friends, relatives, enjoyment of pleasure, and the like. Do show thyself to me. So this is how he went on weeping to Mother. He would pray and cry this way, while his bosom was flooded with streams of tears from his eyes, and the heaviness of his heart lessened a little. Urged by a fond hope, he would be somewhat reassured like a child and become ready to please the goddess by singing for her again. So after you sing and shed tears of love, of separation, he would feel a little relieved from the inner pressure of that emotions. Then he would again start singing some more songs. He thus went on spending his days in worship, meditation, and the singing of devotional songs. His love and singing for her increased daily. Thus, the wonderful worshipper's scheduled period of time of performing the worship and service of the goddess went on increasing day by day. He sat for worship and placing a flower on his head according to scriptural injunctions. Perhaps remained motionless like the trunk of a tree, meditating for 2 long hours. You see, it is a sort of a token meditation on God. You put a flower on the head, so 2 minutes or 3 minutes, usual priest will do it. For 2 hours he is sitting and meditating. That is the who will wait for 2 hours for the worship, offering of food, and then after take prasad. So the whole thing, schedule of the puja is being upset by the extraordinary devotion of the master. After offering cooked food and other things to the mother, he perhaps spent a long time thinking that she was taking them. So when somebody is taking food, they until they finish their food, you cannot just say it is everything is over. But that's what usual generally they do in the ceremonial temples. In temples, the pujari goes, offers the food. 5 minutes or 10 minutes is a fixed time. 10 minutes afterwards, he takes away the plate. So, thinking that all thing has been taken by the deity. But is it true? So, someday we may take 10, 15 minutes to eat. Someday we may take half an hour. Someday we may take even longer also, depending upon how we enjoy it and how enjoyable the food is all these factors come. So Sri Ramakrishna every day used to think, Mother is eating. Let her eat in her own way. Why should I force her? So he was sitting on for long until he felt that Mother has taken to her satisfaction in her own way, in her own speed, and afterwards he would take out the plate. So this disturbed the other parts of the puja, etc. Again, perhaps he spent a long time every morning in decorating the goddess with garlands made of flowers plucked with his own hands. Several flowers used to be there. In all big temples, you see 5, 6, 7, 8 garlands and basketfuls of flowers arranged in different designs around the mother. So he would enjoy it. Mother will enjoy different designs of different colors of flowers and garlands of different types to put around her, some on her hand, some on her leg, some over her neck, and some around her head. So all these things he went on enjoying. So the decoration of flowers, which should take about half an hour or 20 minutes, he went on taking hours together. Or he remained engaged for a very long time in performing the evening arti with a heart filled with loving devotion. The problem with this arti lamps will go away. Arti lamps are just given some ghee. Usually it is ghee in all big temples. They put ghee in place of oil. So this that ghee will last about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. So if you go on waving that candle beyond half an hour, you will not be having the burning wicks. All wicks will have been burnt out. So only the arti instrument will be there. So you will be taking it out. It would look odd. So again, singing for the Mother of the Universe in the afternoon or at the end of the arti, he sometimes became so much absorbed in and overwhelmed with spiritual emotions that he could be made to perform the arti or evening services to food offering, etc., only when he had been reminded again and again that it was getting late for those services The worship continued thus for a time. So it went beyond his control because it was a question of love. There's labor, the service of love, service of devotion is different from the formal service of paid employees of priests. So they come here right according to time. They go away, thinking that mother also will be there. She must eat within 10 minutes. She must be dressed within 10 minutes. The flowers also will be decorated only 5 minutes. So they have got timing. So mother has to obey that. But here the case was, mother is living. The pujari thinks that I am only her follower. As she goes, I must obey her. I must follow. I must help her in every way. So the real attitude of the priest who not only enjoys the presence of God, but he makes the presence of God come palpable in the image in which he is worshipping. The worshipping image will become alive, they say. There is Jagrat, they say it is awakened image. That means through the love and devotion of the priest, the image becomes alive. So as the priest talks to the image, gets his boons, whatever he asks for, the God listens to him and obliges him. Others also can get that advantage when the God is living. So when they also go with the similar attitude of love and devotion and ask for legitimate things, God will oblige. That is how people realize in great temples. The images, they are not simple images, they are living, not just because it is kept in a holy place, but the pujari, the priest, and the devotees, they feel the presence of him. More you feel, others also will feel about it. The whole image itself will be the living image. It will not be a stone image. It is clear. Like this one, Sri Ramakrishna's worship continued for some time. What Mathur and others thought of the master's worship. So when this was going on, it was not according to any rules and regulations. It was the rules of the spiritual world, the spiritual son, spiritual mother. So they are playing with one another. They are the mother and child game is going on. So it has no rules or regulations. When Mathur heard what happened, it is clear that the attention of the people of the temple was drawn towards the master when they saw such devotion, eagerness, and spiritual steadfastness on his part. People at first deride and ridicule a person who is soon to give up the path generally followed by them and conducts himself or does something in a novel way. But with the passage of time, and as the person goes firmly forward on his path, their attitude changes and reverence takes its place. The master's case was no exception. Since scarcely had he performed the worship this way for some time, when he became the object of many people's derision. Sometime later, some people began to revere him. It is said that Mathur saw the master's worship, etc., at this time and said with delight to Rani Rasmani, "We have got an extraordinary worshipper. The goddess will be awakened very soon." You see, he, he just was inspired by the way Sri Ramakrishna was doing. The master never deviated from his own course on account of the opinions of the people. Some praised him, some criticized him. He did not bother. Like a river flowing to the sea, his mind was from now on progressing incessantly toward the feet of the Divine Mother of the universe. So, when the mind is in so much absorbed in Mother, so he would not observe what other people are saying about him. He had no time, or his mind would not be attentive at all to such things. When we are ourselves concentrated on a particular thing, we forget about the secondary things, unimportant things. We neglect them also. Similarly, Sri Ramakrishna neglected all criticism, neglected all derisions, etc. he went on with this soulful worship of Mother, of the daily routine, offering food, offering decorating her, then afterwards singing to her with the soulful songs. So this he continued, and what happens next we shall take up in our next class. Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampatrita Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. O Ramakrishna, the taintless, the eternal, of infinite forms, who has assumed form only out of compassion to the devotees, the incarnation of God, and the adorable Supreme Lord, we salute you with our heads down. Jai Ram Krishna.